Welcome to our first book launch of this new quartet launch that we had at Savi. And there was nothing probably better to start with than our project on Ultrasanity, a project that unfolded for more than 3 years actually, and that culminated in an exhibition last January, and a couple of series of invocations, and that now finally materialized in a book. You actually see in the cover of the book in our common garden, you can navigate the space and look into the different materials and experiences that we have collected for you online. Tonight, we try to accompany you through the pages of the book, pages that are collecting words, drawings, lines that are condensed with experiences and also traces of what we've been living in these 3 years of research and of making of the project. We will try to do that by telling you a little bit of the personal experiences that we lived in this time, but obviously also reading through the book, showing it to you as well. Sorry, I'm so technologically non-savvy that I get easily lost. And that's why Kelly Krugman, that is here now in this very moment below me, but we will move around. So look, you will probably have to search for us and look for us. But Kelly, who is surely much more savvy in technology and media, will really take the lead a little bit in this book launch. But before giving the word to Kelly, I would like to say that it was a long process. It was indeed an ultra-sane process to gather all these energies, all these moments also of darkness, but of light, and to finally see the result of all these reflections and inspirations getting together in one book is really a very, very great feeling. And I really hope that you could also do the same and hold the book in your hands, not just listen to some words, but own them by touching the beautiful pages of the book. So to be able to get the book, you can come at Savi, talk to us. Now museums are slowly coming back to a normal rhythm, so we will be there for you. Or of course you can purchase it from the online platform and also from the website. I would say after this more technical introduction and after having let you know that we are really into an experiment, this Common Garden is a platform that me personally am using for the first time. Some other Savis have been using it for recording other events, like we are concerned about the violence. And so, but we will try it out. Before starting, we want, and getting into the content, we want to also do an invocation and read loud from a beautiful poem that inspired us throughout the whole process, a poem that actually Bonaventure published in his text and brought to our attention, a poem entitled Madness by Shade Marianne Olayoe.
Ultrasanity on madness, sanitation, anti-psychiatry, and resistance. Bonaventure Sobejeng Dikung. Madness by Shade Marianne Olayoe. For the souls in Sukha. Sometimes you wonder what spirit plucks you, feather after feather, revealing your mind as blushed flesh. As whirlwind, it lays bare your earth, and you wonder what spirit claims soul, body, mind. All at once, calling you its own, shutting you out of yourself, leaving you grasping for anything familiar, for the name you once were called, beneath a pile of dirt and flies. Madness is rain that refuses to stop, voice calling you over and over in a deluge, to run the open roads as flood, where wraiths and debris accompany, leaving behind you broken pieces of normalcy and what your mind once was. You begin to look for shelter away from the downpour, for the mouth that calls you so it can take you in and give you peace. But some riddles cannot be untied, so you beat about the bush, all bushes, searching for answers to questions someone said they never asked you. Who asked you? Sometimes you do not know. You become a mask of vacant expressions, something covered in red dust, as some forgotten relic. Buried in time with ancient worth, aren't you forgotten? Everything you hold tells you no one should walk the earth alone. They tell you many things like the rain, but all you have is a pile of rubbish and memories buried deep in the denial of men. All you have become is a story of how fate works, how life loosens its thread and you become tangled and lost. So you are only thought of in romos, hands on waist and clapped palms, how everything forgets you except the voices that walk with you, except the road which is now home. Madness by Shade Mary Ann Olaoye. Anecdote 1. The stillness of the norm. One of the most acknowledged and brilliant theater directors, dramatists, essayists, and poets of the 20th century, Antonin Artaud, Marseille 1896, Paris 1948, though considered by many a genius, spent 9 years of his short life in the discomfort and restriction of 5 asylums for the insane. It is said that what shocked Artaud most was that his family and friends were ready to cast him out of society into asylums because they considered him out of the norm. The norm he was never meant to, never could, and was never willing to abide to. A norm that had been equated with sanity, a norm equilibrated to the basicness and often the mediocrity of society, which was and is still ready to banish, reject, discharge, and scapegoat its own whenever it considers them to have danced out of the realms of normality. It is with this autobiographical baggage, the distrust of society's judgment and placement with regards to sanity and insanity, that Artaud wrote with much ado the seminal essay, Van Gogh, The Man Suicided by Society. At the crux of Artaud's lamentation towards society with regard to the way people like himself, Virginia Woolf, Van Gogh, Gerard de Nerval, and many others are treated is the construction and the rigidity of the norm. Since the norm society creates is equivalent to sanity, those that fall out of this norm, those who Artaud describes as having superior lucidities and luminosity, those with the gift of spatial faculties and spirits, those that have chosen to accommodate spaces we can barely imagine, are declared insane. Insanity as the opposite of sanity. Artaud, like many others, see those considered insane by society because of their illumination in spirit, because of their beyond normalcy, instead as the ultra-sane. Ultrasanity as that which is beyond sanity. Ultrasanity as that space explored and inhabited by those that have broken out, that have delivered themselves from the ordinariness, as well as the stillness and sogginess of the norms of society. If society does construct that which is right and wrong in terms of saneness and madness, then ultrasanity is that thing sold to us as madness, which is to say, that sphere on the other shore across the river, which has hardly been explored by those in the comfort of the right and in possession of sanity. Ultrasanity is for those who have dared to eat the forbidden fruit and drink from the forsaken river. Madness, being mental, or insanity are considered to be forms of deviation from tradition, cultural or social behavioral norms, which is to say that certain forms of mental illness, madness, and insanity could be traditional, cultural, and social inventions. Anecdote 4. Madness, Colonialism, and the Coloniality of Insanity. Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth. At the same time, these high-placed personages protect them. In other words, the colonized people protect themselves against colonial estrangement by going one better in religious estrangement, with the unique result that finally they add the two estrangements together and each reinforces the other. Thus, in certain psychoses, the hallucinated person, tired of always being insulted by his demon, one fine day starts hearing the voice of an angel who pays him compliments. But the jeers don't stop for all that. Only from then on, they alternate with congratulations. This is a defense, but it is also the end of the story. The self is dissociated and the patient heads for madness. Let us add, for certain, other carefully selected unfortunates, the other witchery of which I have already spoken, Western culture. Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth. One might be tempted to think of colonialism as madness, but this would be an insult to madness. Despite its obvious imprudence, violence, irrationality, absurdity, ludicrousness, and the mayhem and disorder it caused on colonized societies, colonialism is not madness, but rather a generator, facilitator, and catalyst of and towards madness. The interconnectedness of power, race, gender, and other constructs produced by the violence of colonialism manifest themselves in the concept of madness within coloniality. Richard Keller's Madness and Colonization, Psychiatry in the British and French Empires, 1800 to 1962, is an important summary of the history of madness in the colonies and the relationship between knowledge and the power in colonial domination. The invention of asylums, hospitals, and prisons as correctional facilities within the context of colonialism. That the colonial regimes saw medicine, and especially psychiatry, at the service of their colonial and racist civilization agendas can be seen in the French conqueror of Morocco, Hubert Louate's 1933 statement at the Psychiatric Congress in Rabat that, I quote, "The physician, if he understands his role, is the primary and the most effective of our agents of penetration and pacification." End of quote. Colonial psychiatry as a weapon of a civilizing mission. According to Keller's reading of Waltraud N's Mad Tales from the Raj, the European Insane in British India, 1800 to 1858, the development of psychiatric infrastructure in India paralleled British imperial advancement. Asylums usually began as private businesses by investors with no medical training but interested solely in profit, and were then slowly taken over by the English state. Asylums in British colonized India were strictly separated on racial lines in different asylum institutions, and in the few cases where British and Indians were confined in the same institution, the colonizer was accorded a residential treatment, while the colonized was subjected to deplorable living and labor conditions. I'll leave it at that. Then another excerpt. Anecdote 6. Le monde appelle fou ce qui ne sont pas fous de la folie commune. Healing the healed. Helps to relieve my mind. Sexual healing, baby, is good for me. Sexual healing is something that's good for me. Baby, I'm hot, just like an oven. I need some loving, and baby, I can't hold it much longer. It's getting stronger and stronger. Baby, I got sick this morning. A sea was storming inside of me. Baby, I think I'm capsizing. The waves are rising and rising. Sexual healing, Marvin Gaye. It is said that amongst the Ngembas, but also in many other African societies, individuals were never considered mad or mentally ill. Whenever someone danced out of the rhythm of society, it was not the individual that was blamed for this out of rhythmness, nor was the individual cast out of society, but society tried to question itself about the imbalance. It was believed that an individual's imbalance was the society's imbalance. Therefore, instead of directing the individual into an asylum, the society would, through various rituals, work patterns, food, sacrifices, music, etc., seek a rebalancing. The so-called mad were integrated in society, and through the performative healing sessions, the madness was cast out. Amongst the Gnawa people, the spiritually weak, possessed, and so-called mad were healed through the performance of Gnawa music and ritual practices performed under the guidance of a malam. Through the performativity of liturgies called Lila and Derdeba, the Gnawa ceremonies recreate the first sacrifice and the genesis of the universe by the evocation of the 7 main manifestations of the divine demiurgic activity. So, the Ultrasanity project was or manifested itself in different iterations, and one of the iterations was in Lubumbashi in Congo for several reasons. I think it would be important to read the text by Johan Laguet, Sophie Bounen, and Martin Ifogué, titled Cracks in the Sanitary Cordon, Hospital Architecture and Urban Segregation in Lubumbashi, 1920 and 1960. But the reason we went to Congo was actually related to the work Sami Baloji has been doing for the past years on the cordon sanitaire. The cordon sanitaire meaning a kind of a sanitary corridor that was put up by the Belgians upon the colonial enterprise in Congo. The cordon sanitaire was an effort to separate space between the so-called clean and dirty. So obviously the thought that the Europeans were clean and the Africans dirty. So it was rather a segregation between the so-called sane, which are the Europeans, and insane, which were the Africans. And unfortunately, these scars in the urban landscape still exist until today. Basically, so Lubumbashi is one of many cities that show that, because you say I have that in Douala, in Lagos, and in many other places. But because Sami Baloji has been working on this, we wanted to look at that. So the idea being that, how do you make the relationship between sanitation and sanity? You know, so after having dealt with other topics, be it healing or alternative forms of healing in Essaouira, and psychiatric methods in other places, we wanted to look at this relationship between sanitation and sanity. Now, if one deconstructs this, one obviously deconstructs not only the relationship between sanity and sanitation, one deconstructs the idea of insanity itself, you know. So this kind of stereotyping and typifying of people based on the colonial lines, you know, whether they're mad or not mad, you know. So that construct we could deconstruct, so to say, by working in Congo. But what is very important is that if you look at the labor conditions of the people, say in Lubumbashi, the women working in the mines, in farms, and so on and so forth, you still see the kind of echoes, you know, or the kind of the repercussions, you know, of such discriminatory practices in society today. So certain people are still, so it might not even be only the physical cordon sanitaire, but a kind of a mental cordon sanitaire, the psychological cordon sanitaire that has been put up and that lives on in society until today. So architecture is also influenced by the notion of sanity and insanity, just as, you know, social behavior is.
I will continue a bit with leading us through some of the conceptualizations of the project. My name is Kelly Krugman, to begin, and it's a pleasure to be with you all near and far for this Ultrasanity book launch. This book being one of four quartets, one of four rather books that is celebrating its launch, a part of the quartets, with great thanks to our publishers Archive Books and our collaborators such as the German translators Florian Bade, Marlene Boschen, Samira Gulmia. And without all of these people, the books could not have been possible. We're ecstatic to have them available now, making handheld and readings the various urgencies, reflections, and cross-pollinations that have been birthed through each of the projects and their multi-winged cores. The book for Ultrasanity can be felt in part as an archive of various performative sections of the project, including contributions from artists and practitioners who presented during our discursive invocations programs, sharing in text what had been voiced and embodied. The book is also a trajectory expanding from our research, deepening and extending our thoughts to share and consider with each of you. As Elena articulated, this project came from a series of foundational and continuously necessary questions that ask us to consider the notions of madness, insanity, mental illness, and healing through nuanced scopes beyond the binary gazes and impositions of Western models, which have historically isolated or at worst discarded those who are perceived of as mad without critical self-perspectives, perspectives towards themselves and the systems and societal structures which play large roles in the developments of many forms of mental unwellness. To quote a section of Elena's forward in the book, and activate the publication sum. Feminist studies contributed to unveiling the patriarchal prejudices inherent in the radicalization of the hysterics, arguing that hysteria is caused by women's oppressive social roles, rather than by their bodies or psyches, and that this was a mere invention, fruit of the misogyny of male physicians to persecute deviant women. As we can read in Hysteria Beyond Freud, For some writers, hysteria has been claimed as the first step on the road to feminism, a specifically feminine pathology that speaks to and against patriarchy. For others, the famous women hysterics of the 19th century have been taken to epitomize a universal female oppression. The genealogy of the construction of hysteria, as well as the pathology of transness, which Patricia Girovici also provides a non-normative reading of, and that Elena additionally cites in the text. Both hysteria and transness are zones that we can interrogate as ways that society creates certain oppressions. In the genealogy of hysteria in particular, it tells us about the way society fears a woman screaming or crying out when her howls are coming from oppression, and those who walk paths that aren't part of a prescribed norm that is societally acceptable. Similarly, there are criminalizations towards sexuality, disabling violences and suppressions towards broad gender expressions, and all of these are examples of the ways that external factors of society can create individuals who are not only thrust aside, but villainized and ostracized for going against a given norm. This project aimed to confront the constructions of norms at the costs of others. It aimed to honor those who are rebels by choice or by environmental and historical routes, those who are disenfranchised, and those who have been and continue to be resilient and resistant in the face of models that have the goals to restrict and demean us if we do not fulfill the shapes that they ask us to become. Care is a vital question throughout Ultrasanity. How can we cautiously manifest care? We know that the realities of mental distress and its various embodiments are highly plural. In the project, we've not wanted to generalize, romanticize, or minimalize psychological difficulties, but rather ask what might lie at the roots of them. Influences coming from marginalizations, intergenerational traumas, ways of being that go against these imposed behavioral models of societal sterilization, and counterproductive numbing tactics by pharmaceutical companies and modes of othering at large. In our IFA collaborative group show, artist and performer Tracy Rose chose a quotation by Judu Krishnamurti as the mantra for her video, Exterminate All the Brutes. The quote goes, "It is no measure of health to be well-adjusted to a profoundly sick society." As important as tracing and listening to distress has been our desire to look towards healing outside of these conventional Western models, for healing tools that have long existed, where ritual, catharsis, music, art, and community are fundamental sources in cultivating well-being. These forms of ease and transformation that bring struggles out of existence that we can look towards in global ancestral cultures, despite being made largely invisible by Western societies. With Ultrasanity, we look towards these practices as nourishing means to ease and support. In the words of Sylvia Wynter, Jamaican novelist, dramatist, critic, philosopher, and essayist, who was a large influence on the project, the struggle we are confronted with cannot be a one-person task. So before we enter into the readings of the book, I find it important to list a few thematics and forms of inquiry that are part of our unfolding. And Elena, please jump in at any point. So,
yeah. First of all, I would like to say that I don't know if it was my headphones, but I heard you as many voices. So Kelly,
wow.
you became already many. And this is beautiful because it reflects also the intention of the project and the book of being really extending our perspective to a choral reasoning and a choral and an ensemble of voices singing together. So that's why, as you're saying, it is very important for us to utter and really say loud all the names that made this project materialize, be possible, and be so poignant and important, at least for us. We cannot say it was important at large, but surely it was important also from an experiential perspective. So Kelly, please start leading out the names of the contributors. And also the people that made the book possible.
Completely. Yes, I named a few in the beginning, but actually it's good to list anew because I did some mispronunciations. So to begin with contributions by Elena Gudio, Gayath Almadoun, The Brother Moves On, Sophie Boonen, Debbie Ann Chambers, Jorg Fingerhut, Dora Garcia, Monica Greco, Ana Gomez Carrillo, Inka Gressel, Yasvant Guster, Christian Ha. And would I pass it over to you, Elena? Want to continue? You can see them to the right of us.
I go, no, you continue, and then
Yes?
I go, yes.
Okay. Aisha Hamid, Frederick Hickling, Johan Lage, Martin Liefhoger, Mfomatsipa, Yota Mombata, Dorati Munaneza, Bonaventure So Beijing Indikung, Alia Septi, Sajdeep Sumal, Hortensia Volkes, and with German translations by Florian Bade, Marlene Boschen, Samira Gulmia, Arlette Louise Indakozy, and Jonas Tinius, as well as the massive support from the publishing house, Archive Books, with whom the books truly could not have been possible.
And our great and unique sister, Chiara Figone, who is more ultra-sane than us even, in keeping up with the rhythms of all the books that she's producing and all the explosion of creativity that she always manages to embody. So as Kelly has been very clearly mentioning, this project was not exclusively a project that was interested in focusing on madness, but especially it was a project that was trying to understand how much the strength of community engagement and collective agencies as forms of healing are fundamental to be embraced in a world where the pharmaceuticalization of care seems to have taken the lead. And obviously, even now talking 1 year after the project was ended and 1 year after we're finding ourselves in a pandemic that is keeping us isolated from each other, this call for staying together and taking care of each other and understanding how much really analyzing our traumatic experiences and our pains together is a strength that we always should remember and remind ourselves that is the first option that we have and not the one of visiting institutions of discipline or institutions of psychiatry, and of course taking medicines. And poetry. We started everything by reading this beautiful poem. It's also for sure one of the spaces of resilience. So reading the book is also going to be hopefully in some little way a space of healing for all of us and of you. I want to let you know how we decided to, materialize the complexity of such a project into a book that, of course, as usually at Savi, is not a catalogue of the project. It's not that we are illustrating what we've been doing in this 5 years in the pages of this book, but the books are coming to complexify the perspective of our curatorial projects even more. First of all, they usually come at the end of a path, but also they open up new paths and they really becoming antennas for further developments of our projects that are usually starting from a research and then becoming really substantial parts of our life. So to let you know, for the ones that are not yet holding the books in their hands, how the books unfold it does through 4 different chapters and through beautiful titles. After introductions that are, of course, the more formal ones and the more curatorials, thank you, Kelly, the more curatorial ones, we have a chapter that we chose to entitle TRMS, These Rats Must Stop. The struggle we're confronted with cannot be in any way a one-person task, where we are actually unfolding a formula that the great Frederick Hicklin, to whom we dedicated actually the book, is one of the 3 fathers we dedicated the book to, 3 fathers that actually we lost in the path of the unfolding of the project. And Fred really inspired us very, very deeply. And when she was at Savi for the lecture performance that I'm calling it lecture performance, it was just a lecture, but for sure it was so intense that there was a strong performative element. He'd been repeating after each 10 minutes this formula TRMS, these rats must stop. We will go into the text later, and in the garden we actually uploaded the video of the recording, and you will understand what, I don't want to say everything because you should get the book and then really learn more about every single word. But Kelly, maybe you want to list what is there in the chapter?
Sure, absolutely. So we have 3 components of the chapter.
Would you like to remain in the
first
common
being
garden?
by Frederick Hickling, who Elena just spoke on, Owning Our Madness, Decolonizing Madness, followed by The Brother Moves On, Trauma Room, which is a segment from a part of their invocations that they were presenting during the invocations of the Berlin program of Ultrasanity. We Came Together, which stemmed from a psychohistoriography workshop led also by Frederick Hickling alongside 2 collaborators, Debbie Ann Chambers and Jas van Kuster, who is a transcultural psychologist at McGill University, an artist, a therapist, practitioner, and she's also part of the book with a text of her own, which comes in the next section. Elena, do you want to dig into the next section, or shall I dive in?
Yes, but you have to be careful when you move, Kelly, because I think there is a lot of noise that comes in. It's
Really?
ultra-sane, it's fine, but it's not.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So the second series of essays and pieces goes under the title "Everything Forgets You Except the Voices That Walk With You: Challenging Madness and Its Stigmas," and sees the text by
Yota Mombaka, So That When I'm Gone, I Shall Be in the Air. And this we'll also be listening into later in the program. It has a video link embedded into the Common Garden, so you can watch the entirety later on, as well as Gayat Almadun, If We Were in a Virtual World, a poem, and actually 2 poems of his are included. Dora Garcia's The Deviant Majority, and then we go into the next chapter.
that is, as we craft propositions to summon the possible on the poiesis of collective mental healing,
which features Monica Greco's Pluralizing Europe, Divergent Thought and Imaginaries of Healing, Sajdeep Sumal's Mad Building Syndrome, an exhibition text in particular from an exhibition which had similar veins of urgency taking place in Toronto in Canada. And Evil Earth, Maybe It's Time for a Rumble, a poetic reading of Aisha Hamid's, and Jas van Kuster's Some Thoughts on Creativity, Diaspora, and Therapeutic Intention.
And the last but not least chapter is on fugitive eventfulness of spatial experience, challenging sanity, sanitation, and the politics of segregation.
which has with it a trio of collaborative text by Johan Lage, Sophie Boonen, Martine Lee Fuge, which is entitled Cracks in the Sanitary Cordon, Hospital Architecture and Urban Segregation in Lubumbashi from 1920 to 1960, Mfoma Tsipa's The Drift 2, and Dorati Munaneza's When They Come, who also provided us with a recital and reading, which we will listen to later as well.
Yes, so now we're getting into this second part of the book launch, where we want to read and convey experiences that are inside these pages. So we will do this exercise of, again, ping-ponging to each other, but also inviting other people to join us. Maybe it sounds a bit weird or self-referred, but we were asked to also read bits from our text. But we will also, as we said at the beginning, make it a choral thing. So we will read also other voices. Unfortunately, we cannot bring all of them here, but few of them will also be resonating in this common garden. The text that, after having listened to Bonaventure, the text that I wrote was actually trying to bring together, pull the strings together of this complex project, and is entitled Navigating Ultrasanity, Trials and Tribulations. And it's unfolding in some different movements. The first is called a calling, the second is called a troubling path, the third, it's a collective path, and the other one is an hysteric path, and ends with a personal path. I'm for sure not going to bore you by reading long parts of it, but I just want to take a page and share with you some thoughts about madness. Madness is not a safe space, not a place to walk in for an elusive diversion. Madness burns, and it does not burn as the Amazon and the many other forests on this planet only because of governments, corruption, and because of our insane societies and the violent centuries-long actions of men. It also burns of its own fire, sometimes combusting everything in it and around it, crumbling any possibility of certainty and comprehension. But amidst smoke and flames, fire also produces light. And in the night, it gives us the possibility of seeing through the thickness of gloom. As Antonin Artaud wrote, modern life maintains its old atmosphere of debauchery, anarchy, disorder, delirium, derangement, chronic insanity, bourgeois inertia, psychic anomaly, for it is not man, but the world which has become abnormal, on the madness of its infrastructures and the performance of its continuous violent acts. Thus, Artaud continues, it is a tainted society that invented psychiatry to defend itself against the investigations of certain superior lucidities whose faculties of divination troubled it. So I think I could leave it here because this is exactly what urged us. These words of Artaud are the words that urged us to initiate this project. And I would say already 8 years ago, Bonaventure and myself were discussing about, yes, obviously the essential and intrinsically inscribed violence in the discipline of psychiatry, but also the limits of a certain Western perspective on psychiatry that cannot be performed on any single human being in this world, cannot be universalized. And so we decided to already, as I said, a long time ago, to initiate a project that could be able to give us time and space to research and to really do it together with patients, together with practitioners, together with artists, together with these voices that we are hearing and that are carrying us on. Also, voices from the ancestors, and yes, this is how the project came about.
Maybe I jump in here a bit before we transition into a video contribution. So as Elena was mentioning, this journey started with Bonaventure and herself, and it has been really an honor to be able to think alongside in bringing flesh to the bones of what the core of the concepts had been. So in many ways, yes, we were aiming to give honor and attentive listening to the different languages of mental distress, being aware of symbolic roots and cultures, mythic roots, and the ways that our plural selves can take shape within communities. And it brings to mind as well a lecture from Jaswant Guster, who has a contribution in this book. And in it, she was writing that if you do not know the alphabet of a person, it must be admitted, and we must also try to comprehend it in other forms. So this is to say that we have to understand that a homogeneity of cultures can be erasure, and to be inclusive of different voices, we have to really be mindful of the ways that there are multiverses in each of us. So this is to say we were influenced by ritual, catharsis, different forms of healing in a chapter that was the second, where we went to Essaouira in Morocco. And for this chapter, the focus was on the Gnawa culture, where therein, if someone is out of rhythm somehow, spiritually, it is something that the society takes upon themselves as a mirror to contemplate why it is that someone in their community is unwell, and to be accountable of their own influence on that reality. So before we dive into Tawfiq.
Yeah, we should move into the garden.
Exactly.
Ellie.
Totally.
So let's go to Tawfiq, right?
Yes, exactly.
Here it is. Ooh. And then we thought together of playing. Of course, the performance was intense and very physical, and it is very important to, in order to understand it, to experience it. But we want to share a bit of it with you. So we're playing it from 240, we said.
Exactly. Are you there? I am at 240 and ready when you are.
Aspetta, I'm 243. Now let me go back to 2. Okay.
Okay.
Pronta? We go?
Yes. Oh, I've started a little early. Are you ready?
Yeah, I can start it. Kelly, we're stopping it at 6:11, we said, yeah?
There we are, exactly. So this was Taufik Isedwa and the collaborating musician. What was her name again, Elena? Remind us? Or are we both slipping? We're slipping, but you can find it in our concept. You could.
What? Abby should come and say that.
Abby, yes, Abby, you were also part of Ultrasanity.
And yes, she's sorry because we were really unfolding a very intense program in these days in Essaouira, and she was the only really very known and very brilliant Gnawa musician, female as woman. So we were very privileged and proud to invite her performing in our space.
And you can find her name in the concept. It's true. Our apologies. We had, I think, 15 contributors, but still, all to say, before we transition into one of our colleagues, Lynn Han.
Maybe I can also say that we were this space that you're seeing, where Taufik and the musician are performing, is a Zawiya. It was called Zawiya Isawa, a place where there used to be a place of healing, where people were going to visit this sort of sacred temenos to be healed, especially children. And in that moment, when we were in Essaouira, we found out that this space was a bit abandoned, not really anymore used as a community space. So we somehow reactivated it for the sake of the project, and then we had amazing contributors coming in, people like working around resisting psychiatric institutions and Western imposed the concept of mental sanity from within the territory of Morocco and the Maghreb, and also that helped us thinking beyond the grids and cages of mental sanity from a very Occidental-centric perspective, and who made us understand that we have to be accompanied by these voices and follow these voices and be in touch with the spirits that are sometimes coming to visit us. And that was a huge, actually, research that we do into the Gnawa culture.
Completely. And I was actually thinking to read a small excerpt from Bonaventure's concept, which speaks about the Gnawa and its influence. So he wrote, it was believed that an individual's imbalance was the society's imbalance. Therefore, instead of directing the individual into an asylum, the society would, through various rituals, work patterns, sacrifices, music, etc., seek a rebalancing. The so-called mad were integrated into society, and through performative healing sessions, the madness was cast out. The spiritually weak, possessed, and so-called mad are healed through the performance of Gnawa music, which you were hearing just before, and ritual practices performed under the guidance of a malim. The Gnawa ceremonies recreate the first sacrifice and the genesis of the universe by the evocation of the 7 main manifestations of divine emergent activity.
Brilliant. So let's call in our dear Lynn.
Yes, so Lynn Han, who is next to me, is going to be joining in to read a contribution from Aisha Hamid, who is also a part of the Essaouira Invocations. Are you there already, actually?
Yeah, you shouldn't be in the same room, right? You know.
Here, 1 second.
I'm up where it says Ultrasanity and
You should
Madness.
come with me. You should take my screen. Close it and come.
Click on coffee.
So some technical difficulties, but we're living in a technological era where we have to cope with this. So Lynn is here with me and she's going to take my spot. So check it.
I missed. Now I don't see Lena. I don't see Kelly. But
Hey,
can you go all to the main
I'm going to read
entry
from,
point?
we already said, from Aisha Hamid's contribution. It was called An Evil Earth. Maybe it's time for a rumble.
Before starting the time for the rumble, Lena.
This time with the planks of wood and the 20 thalers to cover your keep. It is 1620 and the King of Sweden decides that Cielö, now Sali, is on the right pathway of island snaking boats from Turku to Stockholm. And so he builds a hospital for the lepers and the shit steerers and the free speakers. And so you board a ship to Sali with money to cover your keep and the planks of wood to build your coffin when you die. Because you will die here and you will die soon. There is no doctor on the island. In Earth time, it is a few moments earlier, where now there is one island, and at moment there were two. The land, sponge-like, has not yet explained into its final form. It is hard to make sense of the bridging of its bifurcation. And on the main island are the caretakers and the shit steerers, who will never go home. And on a little island, or al the use, you covered in sores and dying quickly and soon. And on Sunday, there's a church you go to, where in a fenced-off wing, off to the side of the building you sit, with others who are swollen and peeling and dying like you. And outside the church is where you are buried. The last of you is buried in a graveyard in 1785. I walked into your church in the bright light of a summer day, and inside it was dark and quiet, the side entering on a slant. I/you walk into the graveyard. Your scream makes my skin prickle. And each step is a travesty. The air is in a ferment. There is no calm in this earth underneath the sky that is once again and always twilight lit. The ground shuns you and you understand where you are, is at the top layer of a sediment of time that lies on top of another kind of earth, that does not rest and is not in peace. No bodies returning to the soil to meet their souls. Claudia Rankine says, in a landscape drawn from an ocean bed, you can't drive yourself sane. So angry, you can't drive yourself sane. Let's say then that I will be I, and you will be called you. An evil earth, maybe it's time for a rumble. Sprinkle some salt on this tear on your skin that will fester and grow into a set of fault lines that we can perch on you and I. I tell you, we are at the Marine Research Institute working on the site of the island's precious incarnation as an institute for the mentally ill. I sleep to my surprise in a former cell, but my window opens up onto a tree and I see the skylight. Sky still bright at night with midsummer sun. Or let's say in a different order. You follow me from Utiskar to an island covered in ticks, lit by a midnight sun. We're tired. You're so tired. You are led into a white single-storied building at the edge of a clearing of the forest. The building has just one corridor running across its length. To the right are 4 doors leading to 4 rooms. Your room is the 4th one. You walk in and, as you're at the ground level, you see the leaves of a brush across the window. A single bed and a table. And oh, there are bars on the window. And yes, the door is solid steel. And you understand where you are is at the top layer of a sediment of time that lies on top of another kind of room. Women who are too alive, too wanting, too unstable, bellies full of a new, unsanctioned life. This is the 18th century, no, the 19th century, no, it is 1962 still, and because they are sent here to live, but mostly to die, with some food, clothes, and alcohol. You know instinctively, and then are told that they never left and never could leave. And this is where one woman, and then another, and surely another and another, was kept and locked in for days and weeks when she was too much. And in the unending twilight, you crawl into this hospital bed and sleep and sleep and sleep. Let's start again.
Thank you, Lynn, but also especially thank you, Aisha, for being with us in these pages, but also for having been performing in Essaouira in these invocations. Kelly, we wanted now to again move in our garden, full of gems and flowers, and go now to Jota Mombaja, and their absolutely incredible lecture performance.
Absolutely.
Let me try to navigate again the garden.
So what you can also do is click on Yota's name and it directs you
Yes,
immediately.
exactly.
There you
And
are.
we want to play together. We're coordinating live because that's the way the common garden works. So, Kelly, we click on it and we let the audience
Yes. So
experience.
let's click in 3, 2, 1.
When I'm gone, I shall be in the air. This is a poem about death and disappearance. And this is also a philosophical consideration of eternity. This is a song about a community of ghosts. And this is also a statement on me hearing voices. This is a picture of a shattered glass ceiling. And this is also an affirmation of nothing. This is a glimpse of an impossible form of justice. And this is also a gesture towards the grounding of such impossibility. This is a dance at the end of times. This is an invocation of what has to be announced. This is a reading of a book that is burning. This is a burned voice holding that fire. Voice holding that wordlessness. And this is a letter to Bob Kaufman and to whom it may concern. Someone said that you woke up that day as if you knew you were about to exit. You washed your mouth, you cleaned up your bedroom, you watered the plants, you bathed yourself, you dressed in white and left a glass of water in your bedside table. You died. I light a candle for calling you. I pray using your words. Hear me now. Hear me now. Always here somehow. I am thinking about you while I try to make sense of death as transmutation, while I try to tune myself with the heat of that candle. The fact that the world is burning enters the room where I live. I wake up to the pervasiveness of fire, surrounded by its flames and ashes, by its endangered species and displaced communities. The death it unfolds takes hold of the words. It crosses the narrative, burning ground, filling every silence and every voice with its massive, overwhelming indeterminacy. It is not a dream. I cannot simply escape fire towards reality. For reality itself.
Maybe we can stop it here, Kelly.
I call you.
Yes, oh, it's very intense for sure. I can feel in your digital presence, Elena, you're processing.
Yeah, in the reality itself, it's burning. That's what we read before in the lines, the quotes by Antonin Artaud, and that are absolutely powerfully and beautifully resonating in the text of Jota, in the catalogue, that is somehow very connected to the performance that was done at Savi for these invocations, and that was an open letter to Bob Kaufman about life and death and about madness. So we don't want to keep you for too long, but we have a short program, still a couple of points to go through. And for that, I was asked also to read one page from another text that was quite important in the context of the publication by sociologist Monica Greco, who is stemming from actually another chapter of the invocations that was not the one in Essaouira that we followed before, but the one in Venice, because we went for the beginning of the project to the island of San Servolo, an island that used to be a total institution, used to be the mental asylum for the whole city of Venice, an heterotopic place to make the other, the abominable, the abnormal, but also the disobedient, unseen, kept out of the city after the waters and the waves, in order to be able to neutralize, of course, the generative potentiality of diversity, in order to silence it and put it aside. So San Servolo today is hosting an archive of Franco and Franca Basaglia, but is also an open space to the public. There is a museum in which our dearest Pelagique Baguidi has been performing, walking into it and reconnecting with the presences, the voices, and the pains of all the people that have been locked in that place for years. Yeah? But the center of this first chapter that we conceived was the one of undoing and cracking with the hegemonic therapeutics that are primarily based on a Western ethnocentrism that is disregarding healing possibilities of collective narratives, but also healing possibilities coming from these different cultural perspectives. So we did that by engaging with both discourse and praxis, disputing ideas of normality, but also and especially with the help of psychiatrists and therapists. Psychiatrists, the ones that were open to reconsider, of course, some of their positions, but also, yes, practitioners to expand nosologies and to question the dimensions of therapeutics grounded in scientific objectivity and ethics, ignoring phenomenological and social dimensions, power agendas, and collective meaning. So it was a very complex and intense moment, but one of the that informed our reasoning, our collective reasoning, was the one of Monica, as I said. And the text published in our book is Pluralizing Europe, Divergent Thought and Imaginaries of Healing. And I will be very brief and read a short extract, but then obviously I'm suggesting you to get the book and delve into her words more properly. So for the last 20 years or so, my work has been guided by a double commitment to question hegemonic knowledge practices in medicine and psychiatry insofar as they reproduce forms of inequality and injustice. and to do so not simply through critique, but by articulating and valorizing minoritarian alternatives that draw on non-hegemonic repertoires of thought and action. While I share this double commitment with the project of Ultrasanity, the starting point of my focus of work has not been on the Global South. For the most part, I've worked on forms of thought and practice that, superficially at least, appear to be part of the hegemony by default, white, European, and located in situations of relative socio-economic privilege, even by European standards. In what sense might these be considered minoritarian and capable of contributing to the cultivation of an alternative imaginary of healing? She's been writing and studying a lot about people like Grodek, that is talking about outrageousness and is talking about the sanatorium as a satanarium, and that's what she's making reference to here. In this contribution, I will focus on such example with the aim of problematizing, multiplying what we understand by the West. Sociologist Bonaventura de Sousa Santos has argued of the importance of retrieving what he calls a non-Occidentalist West, by which he means a vast array of conceptions, theories, arguments that, produced in the West by recognized intellectual figures, were discarded, marginalized, or ignored because they did not fit the political objectives of capitalism and colonialism at the root of Western modernity. And I conclude, if Occidentalism is the image the colonialist West has of itself, it is an image that elides internal differences and that indeed orientalizes European realities that do not conform to the capitalist and colonialist project. There is thus a danger of essentializing the West in a gesture that is itself quintessentially Western. Conceiving the war in terms that oppose the West to the non-West can itself be regarded as, in other words, as a product of Occidentalism. So this goes on, and it's a quite well-informed and very scholarly, but at the same time beautifully written essay that shows also the different positionalities that we brought together, and some also self-reflexive perspective that we thought it was important to include. Kelly.
Yes, thank you, Elena. So now we will begin to make a shift and move again into the garden to Dorati Munaneza, who we have a photograph of here in her white dress during the Berlin invocations. But we will be listening in to her recital and reading, which she sent to us very kindly. And it is a poem that is found in the Ultrasanity publication. And here we will listen in. So Elena, shall we
have to
down?
Click. 1,
3,
2, 3.
Perfect.
Io bije ndiruka. When they come, I run. Ndiruka nkakanguka ndi mu bitaro. I run and wake up at the hospital, thinking too much. Kuva nafakara, since I became a widow, I run. Ndiruka. Sunflowers don't grow there anymore. Flowers don't grow there anymore. Where are the bees now? Where are the bees? Gisasu cyanjye. bomb belt of mine. I wear her around my waist. Ngizirikaho. I tie her tightly around my waist. No one else wants her explosive. Sometimes she blows up inside. One day she will tear my insides apart. When they come, I run. I used to sleep outside. Sometimes I would wake up in someone's bed. I gave birth 3 times like that. When it happened, I couldn't run. Now I have a home. Arikiobi Jendiroka. But when they come, I run.
Ow. Yes. Thank you, Dorothy. So Dorothy contributed with an astounding and very dense performance in our invocations, but it's the second time actually that we invite her to also deliver a text for us, because she is, I would say, not anymore secretly, she's also a writer and a poet. And we are very thankful that she is from time to time sharing these gems with us. Kelly, we have to go back now to
The center of the garden.
center, and we wanted you to read a short but poignant passage of Jaswant Kuster. Jaswant was not somebody that took care of us. She is herself a clinician. She's working with children and working on very complex paths of healing, but she's also an artist. She was featured in the exhibition. What brought us to her attention, was the fact that she, when she's visiting and working with patients, she is constantly, and someone would even say pathologically, but that's the things to look at. She constantly draws to enter more deeply into the paths of healing the other one by touching her own intimate experience. And for that reason, we invited her to also join us in the final phase of the project to show her drawings at IFA Gallery. But she was present with us in Venice, and then in the invocations. Thank you, Kelly, for showing this very moving watercolors that she shared with us, and she keeps sending us. Actually, she's keeping writing us and gifting us with beautiful drawings. But also, she's the person that connected us to Fred Hicklin, and then a whole world opened in front of us. So, Kelly, I really please you to read these beautiful lines by Jaswant. Very special.
Absolutely, absolutely. She sadly couldn't be with us physically in the digital today, although she wanted to be, but she's here with us in spirit. So, some thoughts on creativity, diaspora, and therapeutic intention is the title of the piece. And I will read a short excerpt. Diasporic journeys and art making often bring together strands of human resilience, coping, mourning, or unfinished and unresolvable experiences. In our contemporary world, as discussions of decolonization and countering institutional racism become more widely acknowledged, the diversity created by migration has offered the richness of alterity and other worlds. Art provides a space to mirror, transcend, or navigate the complex emotions of cultural hybridity, lost locations, reconnection, generational transmissions, spiritual ways of knowing, and permission to engage new growth. The primal awareness of children, their capacity for curiosity, awe, and direct experience are part of the channels available throughout the life cycle. We have been slow to engage with a healing pedagogy to protect this capacity and to realize that art fosters resilience and authenticity. Creative work and remains a possibility throughout life, a space for situating an internal home, a space that is fertile, androgynous, boundless, intimate, and chaotic or inchoate, alive in jazz, novels, poems, and art making as part of the experience of diaspora.
So, Kelly, you see me smiling because I don't know if it's just with me, but every time you start reading, not when you're talking, but when you start reading, I hear your voice multiplied.
Really?
And,
Wow.
it's always quite an intense
Wow.
experimental thing. So that's why
Mystical.
I know that the words are all very
Ooh.
embedded, but I have to smile because it's a completely out of my self-experience.
Oh my goodness. Maybe it's somehow mystical. Perhaps the digital cosmic ancestral forces.
The
Yeah.
voices are coming back. But I think we're going towards the end of this event, and we cannot conclude without quoting and reading the words of Fred Hicklin, this Jamaican clinician as well, psychiatrist, but more than anything else, I would say activist, that for years and decades has been not only practicing this decolonial psychiatry, but also yes, theorizing it in papers. We actually sometimes always come back to him in our radio, where we always say, if you don't write it, you haven't done it. And he was repeating that in the lecture that he gave at Savi, that we have to admit it was probably the last lecture he gave before passing. We were very lucky to have him, and also to have now the transcription of this very complex and articulated lecture. So it's impossible to try to convey here all this complexity, because it's decades and decades of very important and seminal work. But again, to show you that we are navigating different positionalities, and we're trying also to self-interrogate a lot, I would like to read a passage about the European American psychosis. And I will jump here and there to then let you imagine where it wants to go. So first of all, we have to understand colonialism and what I call the European American psychosis. We can look at maps of the world and see the vast number of countries in the world that have been under the control of Europe over the past several centuries. Since Columbus came to the New World, it must be identified as being driven by what I call a primary delusion that has shaped contemporary psychological experience. Imagine this small group of white people arriving in a boat after 10 or 12 weeks across the Atlantic.
Would you like to remain in the common garden?
Not having had enough food and enough water, starving and hungry, and they arrive in this place of paradise, a wonderful paradise. And they look at it and they say, "These all belongs to me, and you all here belongs to me, and your wife and your husband and your children, you all belong to me." That must have been the primary grandiose delusion of Europe. The primary delusion is a fixed, false belief of ownership, impervious to rational argument, and out of keeping with cultural belief. The German psychiatrist Karl Jaspers defines primary delusion as being distinguished by a transformation of meaning, so that the word or aspects of it are interpreted in a radically different way. So, when Columbus arrived and claimed ownership, it was claimed by divine right. God gave white people that right to overtake the world and to take it over as their own. But the students of today, also the savants of today, know that that's rubbish, because Columbus did not discover America. It invaded it. And just to, it goes really into the nitty-gritty of what with this European American psychosis is. But it says that Columbus had a megalomaniac craving for power and had even the strangest hallucinations, speaking of the voices that spoke to him about this discovery he was making. Can't argue with people who hold a serious delusion, because the argument will not just make it. So he continues, but it's very clear that his analysis is really a clinical analysis and a very scientific, but also very disruptive way of looking at even the whole geopolitics and the whole main problems that we have in this world. And this is why I want to come back to this formula that he was repeating within his whole lecture, and that was also carrying the title of his contribution. There was TRMS. These rats must stop. Yes.
So, shall we transition then into the final part of our program this morning, which you will be watching actually in the evening. I've revealed the time blurs, the time fluidity. So it's a transition which is important to make because the process that we'll be sharing, which took the form of a poetic manifestation, came out of a collaboration between Frederick Hickling, Jaswant Guster, and Debbie Ann Chambers that was happening in Berlin during our Invocations program, a workshop which traced many of their processes that aimed to bring theatrical, poetic, and mythic models into action by bringing a collective of Berliners together and interrogating subjective realities of each person and trying to build bridges among differences while also digging into very vulnerable aspects of trauma, of the interpersonal, of the collective. And for this, Elena and I will read back and forth from the poem that came out of the workshop in Berlin with all of its contributors.
Maybe we could also say that this was, I think, one of the last psychohistoriography workshop that Hickling managed to make happen. And it was for us also very insightful to understand more about his practice and the therapeutics that are involved in this practice. So for us, it was a moment of together writing this poem, but also understanding what are the potential of these practices.
Exactly, and most especially
of these practices.
At least for me, I can't speak for all. What came out of it was the recognition of the potency of catharsis. So we'll begin the reading. Collective catharsis. We come together to reason, to begin. We set the space, explain what is to happen, giving birth, dialoguing, reasoning, conflicting, confronting, synthesizing. To be sure, we are asked, where do we start? Noticing each other, one is curious about temper, personality maybe, but temper is important. It accounts for us diverging in the world. The group is deciding that a voice will not be lost.
Another voice emerges. I am very much concerned about the boundaries between us. Binary? Do binaries exist? Does race exist? From head to emotion, There is a call to move from head to emotion. There is a struggle. Can this group contain the struggle of difference, of personality, of temper? I'd like to understand better the question. You see, as a group, we are not agreeing. What is the question? Who is? Reflective faces, concerned faces. The group is diverse. Do you feel safe? Do you feel safe? A therapist asks. There is history of persecution here in this group.
What is persecution? Heart to head, a call for calm, a call for unification. Fred, the pot stirrer, says, this is going to be a difficult group. Difficult or intellectual? There are others in the shadow of listening, taking the opportunity to speak. The group, like a being, has an unconscious. Living group, breathing group, moving group, distracted group, intellectual group, with an unconscious.
But we will not shut the light out. If it is not done democratically, it will be done dictatorially. Laughter. What is our common problem? The common problem is the frame. The frame is the problem. Is antagonizing. The collective is excited. The light is coming in.
Madness. Now another problem. No, not a problem, a question. What is the opposite of madness? Madness and badness is the lunatic asylum. A question. What brings us into this lunatic asylum? Quieter voices bristle to come forward. Quieter voices grow louder, louder. I find no connection to the word mad. A therapist wonders, who does not get heard in this group? Not before long, we name a central one, belonging and not belonging.
Pause. I think we will have to do this in a different way. What drives madness? I wonder if this group has enough experience with persecution. There are issues of persecution here. Does the group feel it? I have a problem. I do not agree with your definitions. We have created a society not good for everyone. There is passion here. There is also silence here. The silence speaks loudly. But what does it say? Do opposing views to have to learn the group, leave the group?
Would you
I
like
have
to
a
remain in the
difficulty
common garden?
believing that everyone will get voice here. In German society, we don't have a translation for community. Is this the problem here? The reality is already being defined. So the question is, can we vote? Can we deal with our differences? That is precisely the problem.
Agree, disagree, agree, disagree, agree, disagree. The dialectic. Are we getting somewhere? Do we have to speak in binaries? Another problem, binary bodies, binary societies, binary lives. The chaos cannot be contained. We surrender or we are subversive. Leave it to chance. I have a proposal, authority. For me, that is the issue. Authority and defiance. The group agrees. No, I don't agree. I'm sorry, not sorry. We are not finding an agreement because of the separations. This can't work. Too many differences. This is falling apart. The group agreed, seemingly. Will the minority voice prevail? One voice.
Kelly, I go to the last page because
It's a bit long, so I think it's a good idea.
Was unfolding beautifully as a collective process. It's not that we wrote it down, but Debbie and Chambers were fixing some of the poignant words and moments of discussion within the group, and that's how this materialized in a poem. But of course, it's beautiful to read it as an entire flow, but now we get to the end and we conclude maybe also the entire event with these words. How do we remain safe? Safety is the first stage of trauma. Processing. As a group, we are beginning to go there. So, as a group, we lived the project intensely, and we just starting to get there in that space where healing will be possible, but the path is long and the process probably never ending. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And the process is collective. So we're glad to have had you here with us alongside in the digital in our tumultuous times that we're living through together, and hope to see you physically soon at Savvy. March 18th is the opening for Halim El Dab's exhibition, and with luck, we'll be able to welcome you then. So